and we call it the iPad.
Apple's iPads have been using LCD technology ever since the original iPad, and even the new mini LED iPad Pro models are still technically using LCD panels. So it should make us wonder why Apple has refused to switch to OLED over the years and when they'll actually be making the switch. So in this video, I'm not only going to answer those questions, but I'm going to delve into the latest rumors of how Apple is finishing out the releases of their final LCD and mini LED iPad Pro models, while setting in stone their master plan for switching to OLED displays across their entire iPad lineup. And I actually think that this is quite genius. So without further ado, let's begin with some brand new rumors we got over the weekend concerning Apple's upcoming iPad Air 5 refresh coming this spring in either March or April. According to Mac Otakara, the new Air will be getting the A15 Bionic chip, the 12 megapixel ultra-wide selfie camera with center stage support, optional 5G, and quad LED True Tone flash, which is all very obvious because those are the features that the iPad mini 6 recently was upgraded with, so it only makes sense for the iPad Air to get them as well, especially since the current Air is more expensive than the mini. Now, apart from those obvious updates, Mac Otakara says that we could expect the new iPad Air to finally get an upgrade to feature quad speakers instead of the current dual speaker situation on the iPad Air 4, which is actually pretty weird because it has 4 speaker grills, but only 2 of them have speakers behind them. So it makes sense for the new one to use all 4 grills. But other than that, they also mentioned that the iPad Air could be getting the same dual camera setup as the current iPad Pro models have, and maybe even the LiDAR scanner. And all of this would actually make sense because Apple has a history of bringing their best technology to the iPad Pro first, and then slowly trickling those features down to the rest of the iPads, starting with the iPad Air, then the Mini, and then finally to the budget iPad. Like for example, Dylan DKT on Twitter just confirmed that the upcoming 10th gen budget iPad will have a very minimal update later this year, with optional 5G connectivity and a new A14 chip, with it being the last model before the big redesign planned for next year. But the very interesting leaks we gotta get into are the ones for the 2022 iPad Pro models. First of all, we're expecting both the 11 and 12.9 inch models to get the new M2 chip, which will debut in the redesigned MacBook Air. And that will obviously be much faster than the A15 chip that's going into the upcoming iPad Air 5. But on top of that, we're also expecting Apple to give us a huge design change by adding MagSafe wireless charging to the back of the new iPad Pro models, potentially within a new larger Apple Glass logo, which I recently made a video on, and probably even a new MagSafe Magic keyboard case. And going further, we also got some rumors of Apple upgrading the camera system to match the triple camera setup we currently have on the iPhone 13 Pro lineup, which is probably why the new Air is getting the old dual camera design. And then the final rumor that makes total sense to me is that the 11-inch iPad Pro would now finally get the mini LED display that you can currently only get on the 12.9-inch model. And with that, I personally expect the base price to jump up to $899 instead of the current $799 price. And then with that said, this finally brings us to Apple's OLED master plan and how they could kickstart the transition. And brace yourselves because this is about to get interesting. But first, I need to quickly explain why Apple has been avoiding OLED for so long. First of all, OLED has always been pretty expensive, and there used to be a lot of problems with display burn-in after a few years and other issues like OLED displays just not being that bright. But now, OLED technology has been improving, and things like color accuracy, display angles, color shift, and burn-in are drastically improved compared to previous generations, so it seems like Apple might finally be ready to make the switch. So let's get into how they're gonna do this. The rumors of the very first OLED iPad began back in March of 2021, with DigiTimes claiming that an OLED 10.9-inch iPad would come in early 2022. 2022, which we know right now is not happening anymore. But the interesting point is that they said it'll have a 10.9-inch display, which can only be the iPad Air since the Pro models start at 11 inches. Now in the same month of March, Ming-Chi Kuo came out and confirmed that the iPad Air would adopt OLED in 2022, with Mini LED remaining exclusive to the iPad Pro models because of the advantages of higher brightness. And then in June, the ELEC basically said the same thing, a new iPad Air with OLED in 2022. But then finally in July, the very reliable Ross Young came out and said that the first 10.9-inch OLED iPad would not be coming until 2023. So it looks like it's been delayed for sure. So with all that said, I can agree that it makes total sense for the iPad Air to get an OLED display next year. And since the iPad Air is usually on a 1 to 1.5 year update cycle, I expect this OLED iPad Air to be released in the fall of 2023. But then everything got a little bit more confusing because we also got some recent reports of a new OLED display for Apple's iPad Pro models, which could go from 120Hz down to 10Hz refresh rate, just like the new iPhone 13 Pro models can. And over the past week, the ELEC has again confirmed that this new panel would be launching in 2024 using Samsung Display as the manufacturer. And just yesterday, ET News reported that LG is also preparing to supply OLED panels for the iPad by 2024. And what makes all of this really confusing is that we have conflicting release dates for conflicting iPad models. But I think that I've finally figured everything out, and I figured out how Apple can make this transition as smooth as possible. My prediction is that in the fall of 2023, Apple's gonna release a new iPad Air with an OLED display that will have much better contrast levels compared to the current LCD models. However, it will not be better than the Mini LED iPad Pro models because the OLED panel on the iPad Air is going to be limited to around 500 to 600 nits of brightness, as well as only having a 60Hz refresh rate. But either way, the OLED panel is still going to be a nice upgrade over the current LCD Air, so it's going to justify a price increase. But then, around half a year later, in the spring of 2024, I expect Apple to release a new 12.9-inch iPad Pro model with an even better OLED panel, because that's actually what DigiTimes reported on way back in March of last year. And if you're wondering what I mean by an even better OLED panel, this brings us to a report from the ELEC back in November where they claimed that the future iPad Pro and MacBook Pro models would feature ultra-bright double-stack OLED displays. So they'll essentially have two of the same display panel stacked on top of each other to literally double the brightness, so that the iPad Pro models will still support real HDR with at least 1,000 or maybe 1,200 nits of brightness. And the even bigger benefit is that the OLED technology would mean that the current display blooming issues with the Mini LED displays would completely go away, while also enabling them to support 120Hz ProMotion like the current models have. So it would basically create the ultimate OLED display with no compromises, and that would of course warrant a price increase, as it would be a much better display compared to the iPad Air model, which will only have a single OLED panel, limited in brightness and refresh rate. And then sometime in 2025, I expect the 11-inch iPad Pro model to get updated with that same new OLED display at a base price of $999. And then the iPad mini will adopt the lower end OLED display, also probably in 2025. And then with that said, probably a full year after that, sometime in 2026, the budget iPad will finally get the OLED display. And then that's how I expect Apple's full OLED iPad transition to take place, finishing up completely within around 3 years' time, which isn't bad at all. So there you guys go, that's my take on Apple's OLED master plan transition, and if you totally disagree with my thoughts on how Apple will implement OLED on these iPads, then go ahead and comment down below. But if you enjoyed the video, tap the like button and click the circle above to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.